You've gotta have heart. All you really need is heart. When the odds are saying you'll never win, that's when the grin should start.
You have to have heart. My father was born in Cambridge, Mass., and my mother was born in Boston. They lived in the West End. The West End of Boston was not too unlike the east side of New York. I was born in Boston, Massachusetts. I lived in Boston till I was about 16 years old. We came to Hartford, Connecticut, and I didn't understand, why do I have to be here? All my friends are someplace else. I had to enroll in Weaver High School. I went to high school for 1 year. In fact, I once told the teacher, corrected the teacher on something that she said that was absolutely wrong. It had to do with geography, so it was easy to prove that she was wrong. And I had a bad reputation with the teachers for being a wise guy. I should have come to her after class and told her that she was wrong and showed her where she was wrong. But no, I blurted it out in class.
He says, schooling would have killed me. Schooling would have destroyed me. But he schooled himself. He read. And the things he read, by God, and he retains it all. It's like when he reads it, it gets recorded in his mind on a tape. He pushes a button and he can tell it to you.
Also, he has what is called street smarts, where you cannot be educated. You have to get that from life.
So, when he wasn't doing that, he must have been doing something else that taught him some things in terms of dealing with people. So he dealt with probably all walks of people, of other kids who weren't in school.
But I didn't go to school. The proven pictures on Main Street cost 15 cents. I was able to get 15 cents at least 3 times a week. And instead of going to school 3 times a week, I went to the movies 3 times a week.
He had all the moves of an adventurous Tom Sawyer.
I was not expelled, but expelled for a period of bring your father, or whatever. And I knew that message would be delivered by mail. So instead of going to school, I waited for the mailman. I got the letter. That was it. Gone. One day, walking with someone, walking on Broad Street, and there was this big, huge gray building there. I said, what's that building? Oh, that's the Armory. Oh, yeah, what is in there? Oh, yeah, come on. We went in, and there were several groups, not all together, but maybe 3 different groups were marching back and forth and doing their thing. I said, hey, that looks like it could be some fun. And I wasn't yet 17. And I went in and I joined the National Guard. They didn't care about my age, what age I was. Another able body here. And I was in the National Guard. And so not too much later, we were federalized and sent to Florida. And I was now in the Army. I was no longer a National Guard. I was in the Army. I was still a kid. By then I was a corporal. And I rose to a sergeant with 2 hash marks with 2 stripes underneath. We were inducted into federal service in February of 1941. And we were in Camp in Florida when we were attacked on December 7th. And sometime between December 7th and when we went overseas, we were shipped to Camp Shelby in Mississippi, where we got further training. And from that point, we were sent to California to embark on ships and go into the Pacific. We went to Guadalcanal, and we did our thing in Guadalcanal, and then we were sent to New Guinea, and that's where I got hurt.
Harold, fight fiercely, the 169th Regiment. I'm proud of you.
We went to Corn Bluffs for a corned beef sandwich.
I met Harold in 1944.
Her name was Marilyn Feinberg.
He was in a hospital in Atlantic City. The hospital had been a hotel which was converted for the use of the boys returning from overseas. We soon were seeing each other regularly. He'd come to Philadelphia, and he met my parents, and we soon started to talk about getting married. At which point, we decided, young people as we were, we would have a civil ceremony, and at a later date, possibly when he was discharged from the service, when the war was over, we would have a real wedding with a rabbi and everything.
We became a pair, and we got married in Atlantic City.
When the war was over, we came to West Hartford, and we lived with his parents for about a year. And then we moved to Wilson. We had a two-family home there. From there, we came to West Hartford on Asylum Avenue, and eventually to this home on Wetton Road, where we've been over 50 years.
The name of the company was Park Trucking Company, and Park Trucking Company was on Park Avenue, East Hartford, Connecticut. My father was having trouble finding truckers to deliver his product. One of his products was flour, F-L-O-U-R. It comes in 100-pound bags. What kind of idiot is going to start schlepping 100-pound bags of flour to deliver it? He couldn't get anybody to deliver his flour. So I delivered his flour. I bought a truck. I bought it in Fort Devens, Massachusetts, an Army surplus truck. And the money that it cost me $1,500 for the truck. And I didn't have $1,500, but my wife had $1,500. So she loaned it to me. And she keeps reminding me I still owe her $1,500. But she's not taking it back.
He started with nothing. He was lucky enough to find a banker by the name of Marilyn who gave him $1,500, and he never, ever gave that money back to her. So he's now in debt. And no matter what he does, he'll never in the rest of his life ever be able to repay that debt.
The name of my construction company was Utility Development Corporation. Just east of where my business was a big empty lot. And one day, there's a sign that's put up on the lot, for sale, zoned. What was it zoned for? It was zoned for 60 apartment units. Okay. So, since I was in business, I had to have somebody to help me. There was an attorney in Hartford, Howard Werner. I went to Howard and I said, Howard, this is what we can do. You'll have to be in front because I got the trucking business to do, but I'll buy the lot. It's a cheap lot. It was cheap. 60 units, $40,000. Because that was the price then. Now it's and we'll build the 60 units. How are we going to get the money? We'll go to the bank and we'll get a mortgage. So we went to who's going to draw the plans for us. Somebody that knows what they're doing. Connie Napier. We told them what we wanted. We built on that site 60 apartments. That was called Maryland Manor. We took our money from there. We went to Manchester. It was called Maryland Court.
He recognized that I needed help, and he offered me a job as an apartment rental manager of the building he was building in Manchester. And that really wasn't my forte. I had no real interest in doing that. But since I didn't have a place to stay or furniture, I accepted that. And I did that for a number of weeks. And that didn't work out too well between us because he realized that I really wasn't interested in that as a career. And he said, you're not cut out for this kind of work. And this was in Manchester, so I said, well, I have no place to go. Can I stay here anyway? And if I make some money, I'll pay you. And he said, of course. Turns out most of the place was vacant anyway, so but it still was very nice of him to have that kind of confidence. So 6 months later, I remember walking into his office and giving him $900, $150 a month for rent. Cash, I gave him $900. He says, Harold, here you are. I made a deal. I have the money. I'm paying you off, and I'm moving. I'm moving into Hartford. And that's how we got started.
Bill Curry came to me and said, hey, I can get you into HUD.
My name is Bill Curry, and my dad's name was Bill Curry, and it's through my dad that I first knew Harold Rothstein. That goes back, I believe, to about 1965. They became business partners in a couple of development projects and remained fast friends through till the end of my father's life. My dad loved Harold Rothstein and respected him just enormously.
So I went, he made an appointment for us, we went into HUD, and we sat with the director of the office. His name was George Carr, and he was very friendly and very emphatic that they needed these units. And yeah, you've got a background of construction of apartments. I told him I had been 100 here, and he went, oh yeah, we'll get you the money you need.
And I remember my father saying to George Carr, this Harold Rothstein will be the most principled and competent person you've got out there doing housing. And I know that George Carr and my dad both agreed later that Harold had exceeded that very strong recommendation. George Carr was the person driving that program in the region, and so bringing Harold in with proposals to George and letting George get a look at Harold and his own assessment of Harold's competency. And I hope the endorsement from my dad helped. I hope that the connection meant something, if only because so much good came of it. But I know that was a real turning point in Harold's life. He'd been doing a very different kind of business up until that point, and from that point on, housing, its construction, its management for people of low and moderate income really became his principal business.
We built the first units in Bristol.
I happen to have been in the HUD office as the Director of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity. It goes back, I guess, into the late 50s. And the black community was actually locked up in the north end of Hartford and couldn't get any housing outside of the north end of Hartford.
Our first job was to rehab a whole block from Albany Avenue on Vine Street, on the east side of Vine Street, to Mather Street.
I came to know Mr. Harold Rothstein through the construction industry. He was a great help in getting us into the mainstream of the business. We by trade was masons, and we built steps, chimneys, etc. When we weren't on our regular job. We was union contractor, union masons in the first place, and then when there was a need for minority contractors, minority participation, we was somewhat sought out because we had union experience, I would say. Vine Street, that whole strip in there, we did that under utility development, which consisted of repair, renovation, and new work. But we did all that originally when Bushnell, I guess that's Harris Bushnell it was called at that time, had all those, I think there's 6, 7 buildings in there renovated, and we did the masonry there for them. There was Hershon, Rangoon, Reverend Zezo, a lot of those guys that was associated with Rothstein in that day.
Okay, some of my background was with FHA financing. And so one of the things that Harold learned from me was that there was this HUD, I would really call it HHFA, Housing and Home Finance Agency, that put out these, and FHA I think worked for them, and they put out these subsidized financing mortgages if you were agreeable to keep rents reduced for a period of 40 years. And I thought that was a pretty good situation. So when Harold decided to go into the subsidized housing field, he needed to be able to accumulate properties that he could buy for reasonable prices and rehabilitate them and refinance them through HUD Section 8 and things like that. Well, as part of our partnership with Hal Every, I was able to introduce him to a few people that he didn't know, who one of the people was Harold Rothstein. So it was a good situation for Harold Every and myself.
Over 4,000 apartment dwellings. I've been involved for many years in the construction business. I have developed, built, managed over the years over 4,000 apartment dwellings. Most of them, not all, but most of them were affordable housing. I had over $100 million of HUD financing. Our biggest job that I'm very, very proud of, it stands today as a beacon, is the Squire Village complex in Manchester, Connecticut. The 374 units of affordable housing. And it's still there. I did it, who knows, 40 years ago. Poof. And it's still there providing the housing for the people. And it's in good shape.
He was one of the few people who was looking at housing in the suburbs. And he had a big development over across the river. Then he opened one in Bloomfield. But they were all beautiful housing. Many of them looked like luxury housing, and they were all open to anyone. The housing, in those days, you could tell subsidized housing from luxury apartments by the lawn in front of the house. And Harold, when he built that out there, he made sure that all the developments had a lawn in front of the house. So people used to think that they were luxury apartments.
The property that his company was responsible for, they fixed things. They had light bulbs in the hallway. They had, I mean, just all that.
Other people would try to cut to save money and all that stuff, but Harold felt that the people living in it should have decent housing.
I said it would be really great if we're not going to be able to do a lot of things that we would love to do with the buildings. You know, if we were doing this for a middle class area, whatever. And Harold said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Well, for like cable television and all that was evolving and all." And Harold said, "Well, we ought to do it. These people deserve it." I mean, he would say things like that, and I would say, "Excuse me?" And he said, "They deserve it." I said, "But no, HUD's not going to finance it, and we don't have it in the budget." He said, "Oh, we should do it anyway." And he did it anyway. People wanted to know why. You know, why are you being nice to me? What do you want? Nothing. He wants you to have what everyone else have.
Harold Rothstein has been a mentor of mine. Harold gave me an opportunity to market several hundred units of housing and to manage for over a decade all of the housing that he rehabbed in this community. And to look at it today, it's all still here and managed correctly. He did things for North Hartford that he did not have to do. Most of your contractors today have to follow rules and regulations that are set up. Harold Rothstein made the rules and regulations, and he included us as a people.
I set up an arm of my company that was involved in recruiting and training people that were unemployed and underemployed, to train them in the construction industry. You had to work for me. You had to put on 2 trainees. Whether it's in the electrical trade, in the plumbing trade, we even had air conditioning guys.
He got involved with people that would not ordinarily have an opportunity to develop their skills or to have ownership, because the system just didn't allow it. And those are black individuals who wanted to be developers, wanted to be owners of properties and things like that, wanted to be subcontractors, plumbers and whatnot, guys out there who just needed a shot. He gave it to them. They didn't have the money to put up for certain things. He took care of that. And there wasn't anybody else doing that kind of a thing. So he afforded them opportunities to get involved.
In business, what he gave people was opportunity. The fact that Harold would have the balls to do something like that and to so dramatically affect so many people. I mean, you think of all of the families, not only of these businessmen themselves that owned the business, but all the people that worked for them. So the people who have benefited from Harold's just giving them an opportunity are probably in the thousands.
The extraordinary work that Harold has done both in housing and providing housing, and then also within his operation, within his company and companies, to allowing people to rise based on their ability and nothing else, has really been a very tangible expression of the finest values in this country. Harold has been about helping people realize opportunity, to allow people to achieve the fullest of their God-given human potential.
And Harold never saw people as racially or ethnically distinct. To Harold, a person was a person, not a category.
But Harold, he was colorblind, that's what it was.
I set up and made contractors, minority contractors. I took a plumber that was working for somebody else, and I said, why can't you work for yourself? Well, I could. Well, you've got a license, you can work for yourself, you can hire people, you can do whatever you want. Well, I don't have any money. I said, I'll make sure that you have credit.
I think of Mr. Rothstein as a great man, and my hat would be off to him. Not only did he give us an opportunity to work on his projects and prove ourselves, but when there became a financial situation, he was right there above and beyond the payment of the contract. I remember one incident, we was having a little problem cash flow, and I met accidentally him at CB&T one day, and he asked, said, Robert, how you doing? I said, well, I'm okay, but we having a little problem getting money to pay for this project. Well, after I explained it to him what had happened, one of them was his projects, he understood it, and he said, okay, come on, go with me. And he took me back inside, and I think it was one of the bankers, his name was Sheen, I believe, if my mind served me correctly. And he said to Mr. Sheen, said, listen, this is Bob Bolden, and if he comes in here and needs any money, up to $10,000, you let him have it on my signature. And I think that was one of the greatest things that happened, and I didn't have financial problems for a long time after that. Anytime I needed money, I needed to do a bill in order to get supplies or something like that, I had the freedom of going into the bank and getting that money.
the name of my prime employee, who would have been a partner in the company had he not passed away, Alfred Barry. He was with me for years, and when I say he was with me, he was with me. He was a construction man from way back, and he kept things going in an ordinary manner. Another man that I made prominent in the Hartford community was Richard Rangoon. Richard Rangoon became a big property owner in Hartford, and he nicely made statements to people that he got his knowledge of what he was doing at the feet of Harold Rothstein.
I was lucky to be able to work with King Richards, Richard Weaver Bay, and Richard Rangoon, who both have become tremendous housing stalwarts in this city, the dynamic duo. And we all learned from Harold Rothstein. Harold, you've been a mentor of mine, and whatever I am today, you certainly helped make me. And I know you made Richard, and I know you made Rangoon, and I know you made many, many contractors and other tradesmen in this city. And I just want to thank you. This comes from the bottom of my heart.
When Mr. Weaver Bay died, we went to the memorial service, and the memorial service was in the theater building of the University of Hartford, standing room only. And two contractors on the way out came up and said, you know, my son went into business, and now my grandson is in the business, and we have no one to thank but you. I had one great protege, Richard Weaver Bay. Richard Weaver Bay was a native of Hartford, Connecticut, and was very involved in the minority community. Richard Weaver Bay was working at the meat house, and Richard Weaver Bay would, when my truck would show up, the trailer would show up, he would jump on it and have get other couple of guys to do it, and they'd unload the truck in maybe a half hour. West Hartford, on the corner of Farmington Avenue and South Main Street, there was a Chinese restaurant. I walked in, and who's sitting there with his family? Richard Weaver Bay. Richard, and I said, Richard, I want to see you tomorrow. Can you come to my office? That's it. It was right there anyway. Yeah, sure. I told him what I wanted. I told him what I needed. I told him what I thought the opportunity would be for him. I was going to start a training program for the unemployed and the underemployed and in the minority, and I was going to concentrate on minority people. And I needed somebody to make sure that that they came to work, that they had shoes, you know. And I gave him the job to do that. And he said, well, I have to quit Union Meat. This I think, is a better opportunity than you working on a dock. You're going to meet different people. You're going to get involved with HUD and bankers and whatever. Okay, so he took the job, and he did a hell of a job. We made it happen, and he was part of it, no question about it. I needed a Richard Weaver Bay because he was black, and people trusted the fact that he was black, and they trusted me because I had a black #1 guy. It worked out very well.
Richard Weaver Bay, who benefited immensely from his association with Harold, financially and in his development and character as a human being. And Richard did some great things as a result of his association with Harold.
He just kept saying yes, and yes, and yes. Of the 1,200 plus units he's done in North Hartford, about 350 of those were units that I was involved here in Clay Hill. I was a young neighborhood organizer at the time, and part of my job was to go take on the boss, make him look bad in order to motivate people against him. And Harold didn't play the role. Harold, when I began my negotiations, he just kept saying yes, and yes, and yes. And I could not get a no out of him. So when I asked him, we had gotten, Arthur Anderson and I and other folks down at the city, we had gotten a big 156-unit project for Clay Hill. First thing I asked him was, we have to checkerboard and relocate every family so not one family is lost. Expecting Harold to say no, I had my picket signs in the car so that we could picket his house. Harold said, yes, you're guaranteed that every family will be housed. It was going to take a year longer to do the project as a result of trying to relocate the families. Harold had no problem with doing that. Maybe he'll say no to hiring unemployed, unskilled neighborhood residents as part of the work crew. Went down the street, had a little job fair, got about 100 people to sign up for jobs. Took it down to Harold and said, Harold, you have to hire these 100 people. And he said, yes. Another set of picket signs that I couldn't use. Then when I figured maybe I could rally the minority and North End contractors against Harold, had a couple of meetings, and they all said, no, we're with Harold. So I didn't have to even ask for that. But the biggest component of this whole project that Harold allowed us to be part of is that we set up with Maria Sanchez, Albert Farmer, Sidney Barnett, Nancy Phillips. We set up a community advisory committee to guide the project. And we asked would he and his team meet with us for once a month to make sure that the community was involved in the project. And he took that on as well. So I tried to get smart and figured maybe I could hit him where the pocketbook is. And I got this idea from some of the developers that maybe if I got a letter of unrevocable credit from Harold and I put a big number in there, he would say no. He said yes. And at the end, when the project was completed, he contributed the letter of credit, the $100,000 to community projects right here in the neighborhood, to the community health service, to the employment program that San Juan Center was running, and to the neighborhood schools, all at his request. So Harold, I'm here as a Clay Hill resident that witnessed all the work you did in this neighborhood, as a partner in 350 units that were developed as a result of your work, as a testament to what Clyde and Richard have done in terms of servicing these residents, that we're proud to have you as a good citizen of Hartford, a good friend to the minority contracting community in Hartford, but most important, an amigo to the Clay Hill residents. Thank you, Harold.
But I can't remember, there was a minority plumber who thought so much of Harold that he went out in the community and was like a cheerleader for what Harold was doing in the north end of Hartford.
It didn't cost me anything to pay them on the 1st of the month instead of the 15th or whatever, like a lot of people hold out their money until they don't have to give it away. When they had money coming and it was legitimate, they didn't have to wait 10 minutes. They did it. They did the job. The job was done, and that's how they got paid.
Harold left before I got the requisition in, and he only left a partial payment. And when I went over there, I had, maybe 10 people waiting to get paid. And when I got there, the money wasn't there. So I said, that ain't my requisition, so I put it back. He called me up, Harold did, and said, Robert, I want to talk with you. I said, all right. And he said, I understand you're really mad at me. I said, yeah. I said, I had all those guys waiting to be paid, and, the check wasn't what I expected it to be. So he said, sit down. I sat down. He said, let me give you a pointer. You don't never give folks their money back when they give it to you, whether it's right or wrong. That's what he told me, He said, I take that. He said, that was a lesson well learned. and not get angry when you're going in, somebody got your money. He taught me that lesson. Just be cool, express yourself, and understand the reason why. I've used that lesson throughout my 30-year of masonry career. And I never did that again.
Harold has always taken the approach that if he is going to work in a job and make money and create wealth for himself, then the people who contribute to him creating that wealth need to share in the benefits. And he's always been like that. And that's what makes him so effective in dealing in business.
It was never a me, it was always a we as far as I'm concerned. And I was able to convince insurance companies and banks that that their money wouldn't be too at risk, that we would be able to develop what we said we were going to develop and improve the living of many, many people with just a little help. You'll get your money back, believe me. I had to sign for everything personally. We went into rat-infested areas and immediately cleaned them out and put in traps and brought in exterminators to make sure that this wasn't going to happen again. And those were some of the things that bothered people that they didn't have to live with.
One of the many things people don't know about Harold Rothstein is that he was a genuine war hero, a man who behaved bravely in situations much more dangerous than anything that broke out in Hartford in the late 1960s.
In thinking about the things that would let me or lead me go into the North End fear-free, I think was some of my experience as a combat soldier in World War II in the Pacific. I won't say that I was the bravest guy in the world, but by the time I got to be involved in things that were happening in the North End that would keep most other people away, their fear, I was not afraid.
And so part of his performance during all of that was a simple calm that he had in the midst of any kind of crisis, I think partly as a result of that.
No one else, white or black, in the city of Hartford would get involved in the ghetto to do business. They were afraid. I was somehow not afraid. As Ernie Pyle said, there are no atheists in foxholes. Sure, I was afraid. I wasn't afraid in the North End of Hartford, no. I was accepted. I stopped a riot in Hartford. How did I stop a riot in Hartford? Because of my involvement and my being in that area, I was told, Harold, get your stuff, your trucks and your equipment off the street on Tuesday. What's happening Tuesday? We're marching. You're marching, why you gotta march again? He said, we're not gonna stay in the ghetto. We're marching down Main Street. You're going down Main Street. I immediately went to Art Lumsden. Art Lumsden was president of the Greater Hartford Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber of Commerce was Travelers Insurance Company, Aetna Insurance Company, Connecticut, what was then Connecticut General Insurance Company, United Technology. That was the Chamber of Commerce for Hartford. I went to Art and I told him, you better get your people ready because they're marching down Main Street. Main Street! Main Street! Next day later, I got a telephone call, can you come to a meeting right away, please? I went to the meeting. Who was there? The president of Travelers, the first executive vice president of Aetna, some big shot from United Technology, and I told them what I knew, and I brought my man to talk to them. They said, what do you want? What do you need? Why are you marching? And he said, we march because anytime we act like idiots, you pay attention to us. So we're going to get your attention. We're going to march down Main Street. What will it take? What is it you want? We want jobs, and we want housing to continue to be improved. We will go into a little conference here, you'll excuse us, and they went into another room, they come back. On Monday, there will be 150 entry jobs available. And if anybody is qualified for something beyond entry, job could be available for them too. But please, give us a chance to do what we think we should do and save your march down Main Street. Maybe we'll be able to deliver something. Okay, thank you. He walked out. I stayed in. I said, this guy isn't kidding. He can bring up people from New Haven if you think you're going to stop him in Hartford to do this thing. I know that. Make sure that on Monday you have something for him. Monday, when he came back, they had 150 jobs that were, all they had to do was walk in to the banks, the insurance companies, to the whoever was the so-called large members of the Chamber of Commerce, and they got entry jobs. And there was no riot. Yeah.
Right after the riots in the late 60s, Harold comes along in the very early 70s and says, hey, look, we got to do something here. We got to take a hold of our community and do the right things for the people that live here, all the people that live here. He went out and he started creating and rehabbing new housing for people, especially of North Hartford, creating new jobs in this area. Back in the early 70s, when most people gave up on our city, Harold comes along and decides he's going to help save the city that he loves. And you know what? You know what Harold did? He left a legacy, he still has a legacy, as a guy that took hold and made sure the right things happened, because people still look at you and still try to do the things that you've done 30 years ago today.
The man that we're about to recognize, pay tribute to, and honor, really exemplifies what the Urban League is all about. Putting neighborhood people to work, revitalizing our communities, providing affordable housing.
A person who embodies the spirit of what each of us can do to make a difference as a preservationist, a developer, as an employer, as a community advocate. Harold Rothstein represents clearly the best that we can be. I am pleased to present him with the Congressional Special Recognition for his service, his dedication, his assistance, his charity, his giving to the Hartford community.
They say he's a real risk taker. He's an outstanding developer of affordable housing. He's a great humanitarian. He's a person that had innovative ideas. If you look up the word thinking outside the box, you see Harold Rothstein right there, because he got the job done. He took a risk in terms of hiring contractors, hiring managers, and doing the right thing.
I met Mr. Rothstein 2005 through Richard Weaver Bay. I do our fundraising events, and I was working on our Equal Opportunity Dinner. And Richard had explained to Harold, you know, what I do, what have you. So, you know, Harold's like, oh, that's wonderful, that's great. Mr. Rothstein received a Community Service Award from the Urban League. Mr. Rothstein is fabulous.
Harold set the pace for other developers to try to do. And I can't think of anywhere in Connecticut where any developer went as far as Harold went. Here's a plaque that the Hartford office got from the director of HUD, and it states that they had the best fair housing and equal opportunity staff and direction in the Hartford area office. And the things that Harold Rothstein did was part of the reason that they got the plaque.
There's a lot of people that have made a lot of money in business and in life, and these people have skeletons. Mr. Rothstein has no skeletons.
If Richard were alive, we would probably continue to acquire units. And Richard would be the catalyst. Richard would be the man in front. And with my backing and blessing.
Richard was quite devoted to Harold, as Harold was to Richard, and really gave Richard the opportunity, by spending time with him, helped him get started, helped him and believed in him, gave him the opportunity to develop as a person and as a businessman.
And Richard is almost like a legend in North Hartford, and because of that. And people still remember him to this day and talk about him almost daily. You hear his name come up. And they say, you know, Richard Weaver, the guy who was like a son to Harold Rothstein.
Harold has been a father to me.
The one thing that I wanted to say, that I'm very pleased that all of you came out today, particularly the people that came from a pretty good distance. A lot of people came from Florida and other places to pay tribute to Mr. Rothstein. One of the other things that's happening right now is that we have a fine architect that has turned videographer, is capturing all of this on videotape. What happened on Garden Street this morning and what's happening now is being captured on videotape. Mr. Johnson is capturing it in still photography, so we have something that Mr. Rothstein can pass on to his grandchildren and great-grandchildren and long after that.
I am very proud and happy to say that I've been married to my wife Marilyn for 66 years, and hopefully we're going for a record.
They worship each other as though there was no one else in the world. Harold leaves his office every day and say, I have to go home because Marilyn is waiting for me.
We're married almost 67 years, and many people think that's just amazing. But in the book that I read recently, The Greatest Generation, it states that many of the weddings of this our era, for the boys coming back, there were very brief courtships and long marriages. We had 3 children. Our oldest is Carrie,
who lives in Pennsylvania, who is a psychologist.
He's a very good human being. He has a great love for animals. And as a young person, our basement here, you never knew what would come up the stairs. He had a bear, monkeys, had all kinds of things in the basement. And to this day, I think he has 5 dogs where he is now. Our daughter, Janice, lives nearby. She's the clinical director at the Jewish Family Services. She's a very warm person. She's very helpful, with our needs as we're getting older. And she has a puppy, Sadie, which is our grandbaby dog. I can't call it a dog. And so we had another son, Bennett, who was a very gentle human being. He attended Yale, and he was caught up with the drug society, with the drug in the 60s, and after that he was more or less lost to us.
I have a grandson and a granddaughter who are the children of Carrie and Wendy. My grandson is Aaron Rothstein.
He's a wonderful grandfather.
And my granddaughter is Carly Rothstein.
I love you both.
My daughter has 2 sons.
And both my parents have been very dedicated to Danny and Eric.
And so I have 4 grandchildren. I have all the money that I'll ever need, and hopefully my children and my grandchildren will be able to enjoy some of that financial security.
Harold, your generosity has helped dozens and dozens of students. Over the years, dozens of deserving students of color have been able to attend the University of Hartford on scholarships that Harold has funded.
I don't know whether you know anything about me with my charitable giving, but I am a good giver.
I was sitting in the office and get a phone call from Mr. Rothstein. He says, Jackie, you have to come over. I have something for you. So he says, you know, he says, I woke up this morning and I thought about the Urban League, and I want to bless the Urban League. So I have a check for you. Oh, I've been blessed, so I can pass it on and bless the Urban League.
Harold is the type of person that he's a giver. He's not a taker. He's been very good to me and very good to a lot of other people that people don't even know about. I know that Harold has taken care of a lot of people in different ways.
In the early 1970s, I was an undergraduate at Georgetown, and I know that those were times when money was tight in my own family. I never knew then, and didn't know until more than 30 years later, that Harold helped out a couple of times making sure that my tuition bill was paid. Never heard a word about it. Learned it by chance decades later. And I can personally number a dozen people whose privacy I wouldn't break, who got help like that and much more, just spontaneously, and without ever asking for any kind of notice or thanks, because Harold just regarded that as his job in life, to help the people he cared about and to help people in need.
Early on in my career, I found a deal in Farmington. It was a big deal. It was like a 100-unit apartment complex that was for sale. And I thought it was good. And I told Harold, I thought this was a pretty good deal. And I'd like to see if I could put that together. And he says to me, what do you need? I said, well, I don't have any money, Harold, but I need $25,000 for a down payment to secure the deal. And he said, well, meet me tomorrow in downtown Hartford at a bank called Charter Oak Bank and Trust. We'll see what we can do. So I met him the next day. There was Harold. I stood in front of the Charter Oak Bank and Trust. Harold went in, and he came out 10 minutes later with a check, bank check for $25,000. And he says, here, Gideon, go by the apartment. So I was kind of amazed, because that's not the way they do business in New York. But he said, so I said to him, I said, gee, Harold, I said, don't you think I ought to give you a note or something for the money? And he looked at me, he says, yeah, he says, maybe that's a good idea. I mean, that's typical Harold.
Historically, he never really talked much about what he did for other people. He just did it. Or if he saw a need, he would make sure he did something to meet that need, no matter what it was. You know, whether it's a cab driver who would say, Rothstein, I know Rothstein, I lived in an apartment that was Rothstein's, he changed my life. My grandmother used to say, God bless that Harold, because Harold took care of everyone, took care of my grandmother, took care of his family, very committed and dedicated to his family, and made sure that if anybody needed anything, that he was there.
He's a very loyal person. He's a devoted husband, father, grandfather. He's a good provider, as you can see. And his greatest satisfaction is that her family can feel happy and secure.
He's doesn't take care of himself the way he takes care of everyone else, but he clearly puts everyone else first.
Very, very understated.
He's not flashy. He doesn't brag. He's a down-to-earth human being. He really is generous to a fault. However, to everyone but himself.
I moved to Hartford in 1977. And when I moved here, I knew very few people. And I felt the time in order to establish a Chabad house, I had to develop a network of supporters. And I started visiting people. Not having enough contacts at the time, I was just going from office to office and looking for people. And Harold had a reputation of being a leader in the community. I went to see him. He was very hesitant to support me in the beginning. But after he heard what my vision is, what my plan is, what my goal is, and what is the mission of Chabad, he got very impressed.
I sat him down, listened to his story, opened up my checkbook, and gave him $500. Well, with that, he knew he belonged in Hartford.
Harold, I believe, when he saw people believing in something, dedicated and working hard, he likes to support it. Doesn't matter what it was. We had to build a Chabad house in Glastonbury. To start a new Chabad house, you need at least somebody to take the lead. To take the lead, somebody gave us $40,000. A few guys gave us $10,000, but there was not enough to start a building. He went to Harold, and it was $125,000. And that started the whole thing. And then later on, other people got involved because they saw it's happening. We felt that the Herald needs in this community, it's a Jewish institution, to recognize Herald's activities and Herald's tremendous work with the community. And I feel by giving the name of the building in Glastonbury, the Rothstein family, it was fully deserved. And Harold and his wife chose to name the building after his son, Bennett. And it's called the Bennett Rothstein Chabad house. My daughter and son-in-law held a plaque a few years ago and calling him the tzaddik. When a person is doing kindness in the right way, that makes him some kind of a tzaddik.
My wife needs an operation. I said this to Joe Carabetta. Your wife needs an operation? Yeah. Oh. The letters started to flow. We're praying for Mrs. Rothstein. We're all from Carabetta, even from the church. We're praying for Mrs. Rothstein. I sat down and I wrote a letter to the church because I am a friend of Joe Carabetta. He has prayed, and he had his family pray for my wife. And I have to show my gratitude. And I sent them a check. That was the last thing that I did that I'm proud of. I'm a Florida resident. We bought a condominium on A1A, which is the road that runs along the ocean. And the name of the condominium building was Marbella, M-A-R-B-E-L-L-A. Marilyn's mother's name is Bella, or was Bella. Marilyn, M-A-R. So several people thought that I built the building and named it.
When I came to my grandparents' apartment, they lived in a high-rise, the Marbella, on the ocean. And I think I was about 3 or 4 years old. And I came into their apartment, and we just gotten off the plane, just gotten there. And they had this beautiful, kind of panoramic window and balcony that looked out. They were around the third or fifth floor that looked out over the ocean. And so I just screamed, "Ocean!" And I went running and smacked my head on the window, fell down backwards.
We wanted the kids to come So we went to look for something bigger. We've been living here now for over 20 years. And we're very comfortable here. We enjoy it. There's room for the kids when they come.
And I'm happy too. I love spending time with him, and I wish that we lived closer. And you know, he really appreciates his family being around. It's great to, when I fly down to Florida to see my grandparents, how happy when he sees me, how happy he is.
I used to be in the horse business, and when the horse would win, that made me happy. Our colors, racing colors, on a little dummy were black and gold, and the name of the stable was L Rothstein Racing Stables. Very dear and true friend, Sonny Hine, who was a Hall of Fame trainer, a wonderful man, great with horses, and he and I became very friendly besides the business. His wife and Marilyn became friendly. Sonny and I were friendly, and we would travel any place where my horses or Sonny horses were running.
And it's hammer time as here comes Dance Floor up on the outside of challenge, but technology, a new star on the horizon, shakes loose. It's technology with Jerry Bailey drawing away. Technology opens up the lead by 4. Pistols and Roses with a late bid. And the result of the 10th race, the Florida Derby, is official with the winner, number 4, Scott Savins Technology, trained by Sonny Hine and ridden by Jerry Bailey.
From California to Boston to Toronto to Florida to Louisville, Kentucky, it was a fun kind of thing.
And one day they invited me down to see the horses work out. And I said, super. And I did not realize that you have to be there at 5 o'clock in the morning to see that. And my responsibility was to bring 24 assorted donuts so that all the trainers and workout people and what have you from the horse that morning took place.
Most of the activities, especially horse racing, a lot of people are involved. He's got buddies there. He's got people who co-own the horses with him. He's got people that he socializes with, or did when he went to these races. It wasn't just racing. It was a good deal of social interaction. It creates loyalty from people, and he really likes loyalty in people, and he will do a lot for people that he feels a connection with.
The breakfast started sometime in the 1960s, in the early to mid 1960s. My dad and Harold were working on development projects, first in Manchester and then in Bristol and Farmington. And it was because of that work that my dad became a semi-regular in that crowd.
There was Bill Curry. There was Joe Cunningham. His family was in the plumbing supply business, Cunningham. There was Paul Kramer. I think he was an electrical mechanical engineer. And every once in a while somebody else would sneak in, I don't know. But it was a 4 definite group that you had to get our permission to eat breakfast at the Statler. I mean,
And they would just come, and they would start their day, and they'd talk a little politics, they'd talk a little business, they'd needle each other as sharply and humorously as they could, and it was a wonderful atmosphere.
I was talking about getting in shape, and I was starting to gain weight, and during then, and Harold had a couple of heart incidents and whatnot, and he used to do this walk through East Tarford. So we just walked through the community, up streets and whatnot. So he said, come and walk with me. And once I walked with him once, it was an experience, because you talk as you walk. And it was just so interesting to, we'd just be walking through the community. He'd just be walking, and that's where I think I got inspired to do walking. That's the first time I had really walked like that. I walked with Harold on one of his walks. Because my girlfriend then said, what are you doing? I said, I'm going to go walk with Harold. Go walk with Harold? Where are you walking to? No, we're walking and talking. I'm learning. and I'm listening. And we would walk and talk.
Harold became my listener. Everybody needs a listener, and Harold, when he could hear, was my listener. And he still, in spite of the fact that he can't hear as well, he reads my lips and he still listens. Here comes this precious guy, Harold Rothstein. And come to find out, the more I talk with him and the more he listens and the way he expresses himself and how he digests what you're saying and then reinterprets it for you, that's a very precious gift. So this friendship has gone on for 20 years maybe. And I would say for the first 16 years, Harold listened. He said very little. He's a very good listener. About 2 years ago, something in that time frame, Harold all of a sudden interrupted me and started to tell me his life story in great detail. And I had the feeling that he had not done that with very many people. And probably at that time frame, I realized that we were really very good friends. Now we talk to each other. He's no longer just a listener. Now he's a participant in the conversation of life.
We have almost a standing luncheon every week. Most of the time he comes to my club. I think he likes to come to my club very much. First of all, it's quiet, and he can hear me speak. And beside which, he's very happy. He has a free lunch every time he comes with me. Feels badly that he can't get even with me. But I told him I don't keep records. When you have lunch with a person, it's not for the food, although the food's pretty good. It's a social occasion.
Just the last few years, after Harold retired at least 10, 15 years ago, and I retired probably about almost the same time. And we became two old guys who still talk the same language. Typically on a Saturday, I'll pick up Harold for lunch and we'll go out and spend an hour and a half, have lunch someplace and just chit-chat.
We go out to lunch, we go out to dinner, we do other things together. We're social friends and very close friends. He's like my business mentor.
I call myself his lawyer and his friend. Harold's office is really a place not only where he does business, but it's kind of a drop-in center for wayward businessmen. And anybody who has a deal going that they might want some advice on, they'll come in and ask, they'll just knock on the door and Harold will be there reading his stock reports or, reading what's going on in the news or working on one of his deals as he was for the past few years. And they'll ask Harold's advice on things. I see that happen all the time.
It's amazing the kind of social world that still arises out of his business life and his lifelong friends from that. And there's always somebody coming in, planned or unplanned, by the end of the meeting. And they always seem to me to be as happy to see Harold as I am.
When you go over and just talking to him, and when I walked out of his office, it was like, wow, I know Mr. Rothstein, He makes you feel larger than life, like you're really important, and for me, it's kind of nice to have someone like that to talk to, Richard was a really good friend, and after losing Richard, I really didn't have, anyone to talk to, business and, that sort of type of thing. So Mr. Rothstein is my new angel.
I sold my management business. I sold it. I got paid for it and I left.
Harold had two basic divisions of his management company. One was
the suburban division, which he ultimately sold/gave to his former son-in-law, John Hamill. And the inner city projects, the Hartford projects, were Greater Hartford Realty that he gave/sold to Richard Weaver Bay.
Stuff in Hartford, the stuff that we had rehabbed, it's over 35 years, who knows, 40 years ago. It needs to be rehabbed again. Who's going to do it? Joe Carabetta. Joe Carabetta is also a developer of affordable housing. I sold Joe Carabetta, and I just closed not too long ago, 250 units that I had put together in Hartford years ago and rehabbed and are still owned. My involvement in business is small as it is now, but I do my own bookkeeping. My wife keeps yelling at me, you need somebody, you need somebody, you need somebody. You know what, she's probably right. But I spend maybe 5-6 hours twice a week just going through the bills and doing what I have to do and keeping tabs on what has to be kept tabs on. And that makes me happy that I'm still able to do that. I'm 88 years old and I'm still, I think, reasonably competent.
And that's what I mean by personal force. I mean, there's a package there that's going to create a wave, a bow wave. It's like the ship's coming through, dude, you know.
From the time he had his first bypass when he was 59, someone called me from his office in East Hartford and they said, your father passed out on the floor and asked Al Berry to give him one of his nitros, which Al Berry did. And my father got up off the floor and said, get out of my way, I have a meeting at the accountant's office. And everybody was, you know, here he was on the floor, passed out. He got up and he left, got in the car and drove. And they called me and I waited outside for him to, that night, I waited for him to come home. And I hadn't said anything to my mother. And I said, I heard what happened. And he said, who told you? And I said, you have to go to the doctor. I'm not going to the doctor. I said, if you don't go, I'm going to tell Mother. And so I called Hiro Takata, who saw Harold the next morning at 6:30 in the morning. And 2 days later, Harold was having a triple bypass. So nothing much has changed. When he was 70 and it was snowing, he'd say, come down, get in the car, I'm going to push it up the driveway. And he would attempt to push the car up the driveway at 70. And I think he would still do it now if we were here in the winter. At 70, he got it part way up the driveway. He's strong. I had told him I wanted the little bracelets that they give you when you leave the hospital. The bracelets that have your social security number and I guess the date of admission, those little plastic things. And I had the one from when he was 59 years old, that bracelet. And every subsequent hospital visit, I would always wait for the bracelet, for the little plastic thing. And after he had come home from the second bypass surgery, I think he was 79, and this was a tougher surgery for him. I remember he was in Florida and he opened his hand and he said, I promised that I would bring these back for you. One day I won't be able to give it to you, but here, and he opened his hand, and I have a huge plastic bag full of all these bracelets. Well, they weren't to be bracelets, but all these things from the hospital, from every single surgery, including when he had been in the hospital this past year in Florida. He tells them, don't cut it off. I promised my daughter I'm going to bring these home for her. He's a good man, good man.
And accomplished a great deal.
You have to have heart. The next thing you have to have is muscle. You can't be afraid. That's my life.